Hey guys, it's me again. Um, yeah, had a good day today, and hope you guys got a good rest. Asher requested Daniel and his friends, so we're gonna read that one tonight. And yeah, looking forward to talking to you guys in the morning. All right, here we go. It was noontime in the city of Jerusalem. The temple school for boys had been dismissed. Daniel and his three special friends were hurrying home to lunch when suddenly a trumpet sounded. It was the noontime call to prayer. 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, a priest came out on the temple porch and blew on a ram's horn trumpet. It's time for prayers. Daniel turned about face toward the temple. His friends turned about face toward the temple. All the people of Jerusalem stopped whatever they were doing and faced toward the temple. With heads bowed, they prayed to the God of heaven. At home, Daniel's mother served pulse for lunch. Pulse is food like beans and vegetables, brown bread, berries, and dates. Daniel liked pulse. Pulse would make him grow tall. Pulse would make him grow strong. Pulse would make him get good grades in school. Because God could bless his mind and his thoughts. Daniel, his 3 friends, and all the people of Jerusalem felt safe in their city. For hadn't the city a high stone wall around it? And were there not strong gates in the wall, with a watchtower above each gate, where watchmen kept watch day and night? If Daniel listened, he would hear the watchman call, "First watch, all is well." And later, "Second watch, all is well." And still later, "Third watch, all is well." But one day, all was not well. The watchman hurried out of the watchtower, blew a warning blast on his trumpet, and shouted, "An enemy approaches!" Quickly the gates were shut and barred. Men mounted city walls. Boys climbed rooftops. Far away, so far that soldiers and camels looked like a line of creeping, crawling bugs, came the dread army, the feared army of Babylon. Closer, closer, closer the army came. The army of Babylon pitched camp near Jerusalem. They besieged it. The soldiers built great battering ram machines and pushed them up beside the wall. Crash, crash, crash. All day long, the battering rams beat and battered the wall of Jerusalem. Crash, crash, crash. Finally, after many days, a part of the high stone wall gave way. The army of Babylon marched into Jerusalem. Some of the soldiers climbed the hill to the temple and took away the temple's golden vessels, as the king of Babylon had commanded them to do. Some soldiers stood guard, while other soldiers took men and boys prisoners. They took Daniel and his 3 friends. The army marched the prisoners toward Babylon. Soldiers on camels led the way. Then came the prisoners chained together. Next, donkeys bearing the golden vessels. Then more soldiers. For days and days the procession marched across a hot, sandy desert. Daniel's sandals wore out. His friends' sandals wore out. The hot sand burned their feet. They were thirsty, they were tired, but on and on they had to march until they came to Babylon. The king of Babylon sat on his royal throne, while soldiers paraded the prisoners before him. Said the king to the captain of the army, "Choose boys from among the prisoners, goodly boys. Give them food from my table to eat, and give them of my wine to drink. They shall go to school for 3 years to learn the wisdom of Babylon." Daniel and his 3 friends were chosen. Prince Melzar was given charge over all the boys. That evening, Daniel and his friends talked together. "We cannot eat the king's food," said Daniel. "It has been offered to idols, and besides, the king's food is not the best food for boys. Neither can we drink the king's wine." "What shall we do?" the boys asked one another. Then Daniel thought of a plan. "Let's ask Melzar to give us pulse to eat and water to drink instead of the king's food and wine." "It's a good plan," agreed the three friends. They knew that God didn't want them to eat that. Daniel and his friends went to see Prince Melzar. They bowed politely, then asked for pulse and water instead of the king's food and wine. Melzar shook his head no. "If the king should see you looking thinner than the other boys, and learn that I had given you pulse and water, he might even cut off my head." "Please try us for 10 days, begged Daniel. So Melzar agreed to give them pulse and water for 10 days. "Then we shall see," he said. Although Daniel and his friends were far from home, and there was no sound of a ram's horn trumpet to remind them, they did not forget to pray. Morning, noon, and night, Daniel opened his window toward the temple back in Jerusalem and prayed to the God of heaven. He asked God to bless the pulse and water, and to please let it make them strong, so that Melzar might know that pulse and water were better for boys than the king's food and wine, and that there was a God in heaven who watched out for them and protected them. When the 10 days had passed, Prince Melzar called all the boys before him. He looked at their faces. He felt their arms. He found that Daniel and his friends were fairer and fatter than the boys who ate the king's food and drank the king's wine. So ever after, during the 3 years of school, Prince Melzar gave Daniel and his friends pulse to eat and water to drink. 1, 2, 3 years went by. School was over for Daniel and his friends. They had grown taller. Had they grown wiser? The king himself would test them. Daniel and his friends, dressed in clean clothes, with hair combed and sandals polished, stood before the king of Babylon. The king asked them question after question, and lo, the king found Daniel and his 3 friends 10 times wiser than all the wise men of Babylon. It's pretty amazing. You know, the king himself was a wise man. So when it says that they were 10 times wiser than all the wise men in Babylon, that means that he admitted that they were wiser than himself as well. And you know why that was? You know, sure, the food did help them to be able to think clearer and think better. But the real reason why they were so wise was because God blessed them for honoring him. They knew that God had told them to not eat those certain foods, and many of those foods were what they were being offered from the king's table. But they said, we would rather be faithful to God than to have all these blessings and all these nice things that seem to be good, because they knew that God's blessings are far better than anything we could have here. Daniel and his friends made the right choice even in a very hard situation, because they were prisoners. If they said no to something, well, they could have been killed. But they weren't worried about that. They trusted God, and they loved God, and they would rather die for God than to live for the world. And that's something that God wants us to do also. It can be a challenging lesson. I don't feel like I've been a very good example of that lesson, but God has been showing me that, and is leading me to a new place, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for you guys too, and I hope that you will be able to make the choice to stand when things get difficult, or when people try to give you things that you know aren't good for you. And I know that you've already done that. I've seen it, especially you, Asher. All right, boys. I love you. I love you too, Mom. I got to go to sleep. But I will talk to you in the morning, okay? Love you. Bye.